Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Michael Kane. Today, we will look at another hidden side of female behavior. Have you ever noticed how suddenly a woman with whom everything once felt warm and easy becomes cold? Messages are read but not answered. Her gaze grows slightly distant. Her voice turns neutral. And it's precisely in that moment you feel yourself becoming dependent on her reaction. A paradox, isn't it? You seem to be a grown, self-aware person, yet a single scene without a reply can knock the ground out from under your feet. Why does this happen? Why is it that exactly when closeness appears, one of you turns cold? A study by the University of Pennsylvania showed that 72% of women deliberately pretend to be indifferent at a certain stage of communication. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they want to trigger in a man the emotion of pursuit, that same dopamine surge that makes you dependent on their attention. It's not manipulation in a malicious sense. It's a strategy, instinctive, ancient, shaped by hundreds of generations. When a woman pulls away, she creates a space in which a man must prove that his interest runs deeper than an instant reaction. And that's where the game begins. Invisible, yet real, a psychological game. Let's say you're texting. Everything feels easy. Humor, attention, a shared sense of warmth. You start waiting for her messages. Every new notification is a small shot of dopamine. Your brain links her attention with pleasure. But then she suddenly disappears. No arguments, no reason. Just silence. An hour passes. 2. You check your phone, even though you promised yourself you wouldn't. And at that moment, you're already moving to her rhythm. It's not her waiting for you. It's you waiting for her. And that's the first sign of dependence. Not romantic, but neurochemical. The brain doesn't distinguish emotional unavailability from playfulness. It simply registers that the source of pleasure has stopped providing its usual dose. For most women, indifference is not cruelty. It's a tool of selection. From the standpoint of evolutionary psychology, a woman gains a sense of safety not from the man who is emotionally explosive, but from the one who is stable, steady, and in control. That's how the subconscious test works. If you panic when she grows colder, you're showing that your emotional grounding depends on external validation. But if you remain calm and balanced, the woman's brain reads, "This man is a stable source." Coldness is a filter, a test of depth, not a test of emotional display. Imagine the situation. He texts her, "How was your day?" The answer, "It was fine." A smiley but without engagement. He waits, asks another question. Silence. A day passes. She writes first, "Hey, how are you?" And suddenly everything comes alive again. At that moment, the man doesn't realize that his brain has just gone through the cycle of reward, scarcity, reward. That very cycle forms dependency. It's the same psychological pattern used by social media, gaming apps, and even financial markets. Intermittent reward creates stronger craving, and a woman, often without even realizing it, repeats the same logic. The strategy of high value. From that moment on, control shifts not to the one who feels more, but to the one who manages the distance better. She knows a single short message can bring your attention back, which means she doesn't have to rush. Now, you, on the other hand, start thinking that you must prove, show, or win back her interest. And in that very moment, you lose your main resource, your inner center. A woman doesn't feel your words. She feels your fluctuations. Coldness is not silence. It's a mirror in which you begin to see how dependent you become on external response. That's why coldness isn't accidental. It's a stage. She's not testing your emotions. She's testing your stability. And if you don't understand what's happening, your brain hands over control by itself. You start thinking you have to get her back instead of realizing what's happening within yourself. But to understand the game of indifference, you need to understand not the woman, but the brain, yours, hers, and how they exchange signals, even in silence. When a woman becomes cold, it doesn't necessarily mean she's emotionally distant. Sometimes it's quite the opposite. At that very moment, she's more involved than ever. Just not outwardly, but inwardly. It's hard to accept this because we're used to thinking, if someone is silent, it means they don't care. But in reality, silence can be a form of observation, a form of control, and, if we're being honest, a form of power. On the neurochemical level, it's simple. We are addicted to dopamine. This substance isn't about pleasure itself, but about the anticipation of pleasure. When a woman is warm and engaged, the dopamine system receives its reward. But when she turns cold, the brain doesn't stop working. It starts searching for a way to restore the previous level of stimulation. You begin to analyze, to write, to check, and all of that activates the same dopamine pathway. And here lies the paradox. Her coldness amplifies your involvement. A pause triggers a stronger emotional response than attention does. Your reward system confuses pain with interest. And that is the main psychological hook of dependency. Women sense the dynamics of attention better than men do, from childhood. It's not magic, nor some mystical female intuition. It's simply a more finely tuned social radar. They notice when a man loses focus, when he's emotionally captured, when he starts trying to please instead of just being himself. It's precisely at that moment that the strategy of distance is activated. It's not a performance, but an unconscious correction of balance. Her brain is essentially saying, stop. If you've started depending, it's time to restore the distance. The paradox is, in that moment, the woman may actually feel even more affection than before. But her strategy is to preserve the structure of the relationship, to prevent it from collapsing under the weight of your emotional involvement. He tells her about his plans, shares, smiles. She listens, nods. But at some point, she simply turns her gaze toward the window. For him, it's a signal, loss of interest. For her, it's a way to maintain balance. She feels that the conversation is becoming too intense, too emotionally dense, and she takes a step back, not because she doesn't feel anything, but because she feels too much. A woman knows how to regulate emotional amplitude. A man usually doesn't. Men often move head-on. If they like someone, they show it. If they don't, they disappear. A woman acts more softly but more precisely. The strategy of unavailability works by a simple principle: value through scarcity. The human brain is wired to assign more importance to what cannot always be obtained. It's a universal law, valid for both finance and emotion. When a woman becomes a little colder, she's not punishing the man. She's raising her perceived value in his eyes, and she does it unconsciously. This strategy has ancient roots. In primitive tribes, a woman couldn't afford to be too emotionally accessible. Otherwise, she would lose her sense of choice and safety. Modern culture has changed, but the brain has not. The same mechanisms operate in messengers and in relationships. Sometimes she feels dependency too. She thinks, why isn't he texting first? She checks his stories, waits, analyzes, but doesn't write. She knows exactly how it feels. It's the same sensation you have when you wait for her reply, and yet she restrains herself, because subconsciously she understands. The one who remains calm is the one who controls the emotional field. And in this silent battle of two invisible centers, the winner isn't the one who's louder, but the one who can exist in silence. When a woman becomes cold, she's not testing your words, not even your actions. She's testing your emotional discipline. Can you remain yourself when you're cut off from the external source of approval? Will you start proving, persuading, seeking confirmation of your worth? It's not about pride. It's about the perception of stability. Because a woman doesn't choose the emotion of the moment, she chooses emotional reliability. Her coldness isn't punishment, it's a mirror. It shows how whole you can remain when you're denied the usual dose of attention. If you get irritated, text, pressure, try to figure out what's going on, you lose yourself. But if you remain an observer, you step out of the script of dependency. You see, in these games, there are no guilty ones. There are only two sides of the same system: the male mind that seeks control and the female psyche that tests for stability. Real strength doesn't lie in exposing a woman's strategy, but in learning to see it without fear. When you stop perceiving distance as a threat and start seeing it as space, you stop reacting. And then something unexpected happens. She returns on her own. Not because you've won, but because you've kept your balance. Coldness is not an ending. It's a transition, a signal. Check how dependent you are on reaction. It's the moment when a man can, for the first time, see himself without the filter of desire. When you stop reacting, you stop being controlled. And then what appears is not power, but clarity. But what comes next? When you've already understood the game, understood why she behaves that way, how do you regain your inner strength? Not through struggle, but through awareness. This is the third stage, awareness and the power of the observer. At some point, you stop chasing. The phone still lies nearby, but it no longer controls your attention. You no longer wait for notifications, you simply live. And that's when realization comes. This whole game of indifference was never about her. It was always about you. A woman's coldness is a mirror in which you see how much your value depended on external validation. You begin to understand that all this time you weren't trying to get the woman back. You were trying to regain your sense of significance. Pause. This realization is uncomfortable, but it's liberating. Because as long as you're searching for why she did this, you don't notice that it was you who allowed her to influence your state. There are two states in which one can live: reaction and observation. In reaction, you're like a pendulum. She writes, you soar. She's silent, you fall. Your entire inner balance depends on an external signal. But when you shift into the state of the observer, you see the process. You notice, here I got triggered. Here I wanted to prove something. And in that moment, you're no longer inside the reaction. You're above it. That's not coldness in response. That's awareness. One man once shared, I used to check my phone every 10 minutes. Now I just go outside. I breathe. I look at the city, and I realize nothing has really changed. Except for one thing, my attention now belongs to me. That is the moment of transition, when external chaos no longer dictates your inner state, when you can look at distance and feel no threat, because you're no longer seeking validation. When you are stable, a woman senses it instinctively. It's not about male coldness or dominance. It's about an inner point of equilibrium that cannot be faked. If you remain calm, her brain receives the signal. This man is safe. He can be respected. He can be trusted. And then distance loses its meaning, because a game ceases to exist when even one of its players stops playing, and then a message. After silence, simple. How are you? Before you would have replied instantly. Now you just smile, because you understand now that her return is not a victory. It's simply confirmation that you've stopped reacting. You're not playing at coldness. You've just become someone who no longer depends on her. Freedom, it's not detachment and not indifference. Freedom is when you're able to feel, but not drown in it. When you're capable of loving, but without losing yourself. When you can see the strategy and not judge it. You simply understand. Everyone has their own way of protecting themselves. In the end, it's not about why 72% of women pretend to be indifferent. It's about why you allowed another person's reaction to control your emotions. You cannot control someone else's feelings, but you can control your own. And in that lies strength. Not loud, not demonstrative. Quiet, steady, real. Because when you are calm, you become someone who doesn't need to be tested. You've already proven everything. Not through actions, but through inner state. And here's the paradox. It's exactly when you stop fighting for attention that attention returns to you on its own. Because the world always mirrors your inner balance. When you are whole, you are independent. When you observe, you understand. And when you understand, you can no longer be drawn into the game. Indifference is not coldness. It's an invitation to awareness. And if you've understood that, you've already stepped beyond it. Don't try to control a woman. Learn to understand her. Subscribe if you want to see what most men never notice.